Good afternoon, Infuzion dealers, and welcome to the final installment of our Infuzion virtual speaker series for 2024. Our final session here is going to offer some excellent insight and takeaways surrounding the topic of the latest human resource trends and succession planning for small business in Canada. Our speaker is Joanne Rivard, who is an executive coach and human resource consultant with over 30 years of experience in diverse industries, holding senior HR roles in both corporate and consulting settings. Joanne works with leaders to tangibly define and measure the effectiveness of an organization's culture and builds on their strengths to achieve business results. We've known Joanne here at Infuzion for a couple of years now, and full disclosure, she also does great work for Infuzion in her capacity as an HR consultant. So let's dive into these topics this afternoon, which are pretty hot button issues in our industry these days, and get down to it. And welcome, Joanne. Good afternoon, Joanne.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Chris. Great to be here. Hello, everybody. I am here today to talk about human resources, and my introduction gave you my background. What it hasn't explained is that after all the years in corporate, I really have taken all of that experience, and I'm trying to help smaller employers be the best that they can be, if I can coin that phrase. And so I'm trying to apply that knowledge to smaller environments, and I think it's working. My personal purpose is to help one leader at a time, every single leader, discover how to be as strong as they can be for their staff and help the organization. So today, I really hope to awaken your curiosity. I think that effective HR management is crucial for an employer of any size, small, large, medium, everything in between. So we're going to talk about the HR trends. But before I jump into the trends themselves, I'd like to point out that my philosophy is that HR is not a department. It's not a function. It's actually part of every leader's role, and especially part of a business owner's role. So I don't see it as a separate entity per se. And as Richard Branson said, you know, if you take care of your employees, they will take care of your business. Well, I think of HR as being the expert that takes care of you to take care of your employees, to take care of your business. That's sort of an extension of it all. So hopefully that will, you'll see my perspective of that as we go on today. So I've been asked to talk about HR trends. Well, I'm sure that you've read the multitude of articles out there. I can't open my phone without seeing something about people management and trends. So there won't be any huge surprises here. But in terms of what's out there most often right now, the first big trend is hybrid. Right? Is hybrid here to stay? Whether you're small or large, when you have people that are flexible to, if you're not talking about frontline workers or frontline retail staff, if you're talking about people in the office, this is the million-dollar question, and there's never a perfect answer, especially people that are leading the charge in this are the larger organizations that have very expensive real estate in major cities. So this is a big topic in HR. Having said that, in England, most recently, they've done a lot of studies about a 4-day work week, but it hasn't been very popular. So the hybrid thing, the flexibility, how many days, is it here to stay or not to stay? It changes every single day as to what the outcome is going to be there. The second big trend is artificial intelligence. I'm sure you've heard about ChatGPT. There's Bard, there's a few others. As a matter of fact, there's about 50 plus AI tools out there. So the big question is, how will it impact jobs? What industries, what will impact candidate skill sets? Are people going to be able to adjust? Will we need to adjust as a business? All of that sort of thing. The reality is we're at the very early stages of that, but it's a trend that people keep looking at it and watching it. Then the next one would be what are the hot topics of today? The hot skills of today. And number one rated as the most important skill for any candidate out there right now is ability to solve conflicts or to resolve conflicts. So managing conflicts is very critical, whether you're as a leader, not a leader, small or large business. So that's a top skill. And the second in line is coaching. which is interesting for me. So those aren't pegged as the top skills. Now, funny enough, just as recent as 2 years ago, the top skill was analytical thinking, right? Trying to sort of be more focused on metrics in the workplace. It doesn't mean that those ones, like analytical thinking, are no longer important. It just means that things have shifted a little bit in the trends today. The next hot trend is really social impact. And, you know, is your organization doing anything around social impact in order to attract young talent? Now, what I mean by social impact is anything about the environment. If there's major, crises or disasters in your area, are you helping through charities? Are you helping in any way you can in your community per se? Because the reality is we're right now fighting for a lot of talent, and attracting young talent is important. And as Chris called them in the previous session, the echo generation, what I call the millennials, it's the same generation, they look for that. They look for an organization who cares. Now, it doesn't mean you have to invest a lot of time and money. It means that you have to very carefully pick what your social impact would be and show that you care. The other thing that's a hot topic in the press these days is diversity, equity, and inclusion, mental health, and things like career trends and that sort of thing. Those topics, it's not that they're not important for small business, but they're less front and center for small business because you don't have the critical mass to roll out major programs for things like this. But of course, in the press or in the media, we hear Bell Let's Talk Day, and we hear all about these things on an ongoing basis. So knowing how to answer those questions or address these issues as a small employer, it's just equally as important. Just may not be the same kind of programs per se. Last year, but definitely not least, is we have to be aware that there's always new legislation. So when you look at the news, you know what's hot. There's going to be something changing in the legislation somewhere. And we have to think about, how is it affecting me? How is it affecting my business? And that's important to all of us in this room. So really what I'm here to hopefully shed some light on today is how HR can help you with these trends of people-related issues in the workplace. And a good HR expert will sort of know a little bit about these things, or certainly know where to get information to help you about these things. But I'd like to first focus on the final trend that I listed there, the legislation, because that's probably one that gives us the most headache up front. There is a myriad of employment laws and regulations, and a good HR expert or an advisor will help you navigate through all of that. So first and foremost, we all know about provincial standards, not just Ontario, but in every province, we have different employment standards. Many of them are fairly common, or they overlap in theme and rules, but there are some nuances and differences between the provinces. So, a good expert will guide you wherever you are, will guide you in those standards. And that often is the springboard for writing your policies. And your policies are not there to hurt you or to be the police sort of environment of the workplace. They're there to protect you and to bring some clarity as to what's expected, both as an employer and as an employee in the workplace. So policies are very much to sort of translate the standards and protect the employer. So a good HR expert will guide you through that. The other reason you might want sort of a lifeline in HR or an expert around is around all the laws to do with privacy. So privacy, I'm talking about here, can you share somebody's phone, an employee's phone number with another employee if they want that? Well, technically you can't, right? The employee should be giving out their phone number, not you, the employer. So there's a lot of stuff around privacy of personal information, what you must share, what you can't share, all that sort of thing. And it even extends to electronic monitoring, right? But if people are using your computers and your sites and your software, your licensing, then there are laws around monitoring the use of that. And if people misuse what they post on their company equipment that could put you at risk. So there's lots of things around that. Human rights is something that was sorely needed 40, 50 years ago. I'm really glad they're in place, but sometimes navigating through how do we handle if there is a complaint? Do we have a process? It's a very sensitive situation, and we have to have the right advisor to guide us through that. So, and of course, you can extend that to anti-discrimination laws and respect in the workplace. And now bullying is an issue in the workplace that we have to make sure that we have the right framework to manage those situations and they don't become a problem. I feel like I'm talking about fairly alarming stuff here, but what I really want to sort of point out is, as small employers, it's sometimes confusing, difficult, and having an HR expert around either part-time or just a phone call away or in-house, which is even better, helps you through these things. The other sort of element around employment law and regulations is contracts. I mean, when you make someone a job offer, you're writing them a contract. It's an open-ended contract in terms of timeline, but there's a lot of clauses in there that you might need some help making sure that they're properly written. And then every single day, there's court cases that create new precedents that might influence those contracts. Some of those clauses might need to change and that sort of thing. So that's a headache. Now, I want to point out that HR experts are not lawyers, and I'm certainly not a lawyer. And it doesn't replace a lawyer. But a good HR expert will save you a lot of legal fees because they'll do most of the work ahead of time and protect you, be more proactive, I guess. And when you need to hire a lawyer, it's being more reactive. An HR expert will basically stay ahead of the changes. And what I mean by that is things like sick leave rules really changed during COVID, right? Throughout COVID. At first, before COVID, people could take sick days, but they didn't have to be paid for those sick days. Now there has to be a minimum of 3 days paid per year. And it's not just for sick days. It could be for taking care of a sick family member. It could be for a whole bunch of things. It could be for tissue donation. It could be, it could get quite murky out there. But there's other changes that have happened in the last few years, such as, if you have temporary employees, but that they end up working basically full-time hours for quite a long time, under the law, they're pretty much considered permanent employees. So navigating all of that becomes important. And family leave, that's very different from one province to the other. In Ontario, for example, somebody could take up to 2 years to take care of a dying family member. So they're there to protect the employee, but also how do you navigate through that as an employer? So those changes, it's important to have somebody to help you through that. And the ones that are not so recent, I would say, is the ongoing regulations that demand that you do some training and record keeping, such as health and safety, maybe some pay equity, maybe some accessibility for Disabilities Act. Certainly that applies in Ontario. Those kinds of things, may or may not impact. Most of the time, these regulations come up if you have 10 employees or more. That's the most common number of employees that you need to then start to not worry, but be aware of these things. And I'd say that probably at some point in time, you've had to hire a lawyer, whether to register your business or whatever you should ask for that law firm to put you on their mailing list. Every law firm out there has a monthly bulletin and they keep you aware of some of these things. And you don't need to memorize it. You don't need to be an expert in it, but you need to sort of have it in the back of your mind to think, oh yeah, I should ask somebody about that because I think that impacts us. So, in my experience, this is some of the reasons that we help employers, or HR experts help employers. But there's a whole bunch of other reasons, over and above the basic law. Because what really matters is making sure that your employees are engaged, that they're productive, they're happy to be there, that you don't have too much turnover and they leave, or basically that your results are there in your business. So I'm going to list a bunch of things that, you may turn to an HR expert for from time to time. The most common one is, of course, recruitment and retention. You might need some help in terms of how do I interview, where I get my people, I have unique skills required, or all the way through to making an offer and onboarding them, and there may be some immigration issues. And of course, the one common thing that we're asked about as HR experts is performance management. How do I set up a system so I can be clear about my goals and what's expected of my staff, and I could then measure it and make sure that they produce and document their performance. So that's a very common way that we provide services, but there's tons of people like me out there. There's tons of services. I'm not trying to specifically talk about, my services, but there's a lot of good HR experts who could guide you through this. What really matters overall is very much employee relations and engagement, making sure that you're communicating the right things, you're communicating often enough. There's some town halls, that you maintain a strong culture and you minimize conflicts, or you keep them confidential so it doesn't, it doesn't become negative gossip in a workplace. And then overall coaching of leaders is really critical as well. HR advisors can help you in your area of learning and development, meaning people at all levels want some level of development. They want some growth. They want, they might look for some advice on career management, but as a baseline, there will be some mandated training that's required, especially in Ontario around, accessibilities, for instance, or respect in the workplace. And I'll give you an example there. Every company has to have a policy around respect in the workplace or no harassment, regardless of your size, by the way. And there's some training that's mandated there. If your leaders don't know, there's a concept called the directing mind principle, is that as a leader of any size of organization, you need to know that what you're responsible for. Even if somebody else does something wrong, you become responsible because you're a leader in that organization. So sometimes around the policies, there's some mandated training that's very, very critical. A good HR expert will help in the area of succession planning. So, if you've got someone who's been with you from the beginning of the few years that you opened your business to now, but they're thinking of retirement, you want to make sure that you transfer their knowledge to their successor so that knowledge doesn't walk out the door with them. Or even if people quit, even if they're not at retirement age, you need to find a way to sort of plan for a backup to mitigate your risk. So that becomes a hot topic in terms of HR advice. Competitive pay and benefits, that's kind of a known. Of course, you want to make sure as an employer that you don't overpay, you don't underpay, you pay fairly according to the market in your industry. Rules around overtime. Am I even competitive with benefits? And you have to administer those benefits. So that becomes very much a part of the HR advisor's responsibility. This one might be a little less known, I guess, as a service, but providing metrics analytics, meaning, let's say you think, oh, I have high turnover for my business. Well, how do you know it's high turnover? You need to compare it to others in the industry, others of the same size of business. Maybe you feel like there's been a lot of turnover, but is it high? Or you might feel like it's low turnover and go, not really, So those kinds of things, bringing data by which to make decisions, an HR expert can help you with. And then certainly here, last but not least, is the whole health and safety bucket. That's a big bucket. We usually think of health and safety as physical, so making sure that the warehouse is safe and your workplace environment is safe. But there's also the mental health now. That's a big part of the workers' in daily environment. And as employers, we are responsible for that. So, when you think of HR, you often think of the hiring or the firing process. But what I really wanted to point out to you is that, now HR experts can provide you guidance in any one of these things. Now, believe me, in any business, you don't need all of this all the time. You might need you might have a question about any one of these topics here and there. So knowing where to get that information is critical, or having someone to call is critical. And as an HR expert, if somebody calls me or any one of my colleagues for information, we think of it as there's three stakeholders. There's three groups that help you run your people business, right? And that three groups are first the employer. That's the number one sort of client as far as HR is concerned. And what the employer needs from HR is you need an expert to handle the sensitive matters, right? An employer is not expected to be to know how to handle every situation. They certainly don't know all the laws. They're busy servicing the client. They're busy getting business and managing the business. So the HR usually, hopefully you'll have an expert at your fingertips to be able to handle the sensitive matters, and someone who will act in your best interest. That's critical. And often HR is there to make sure you comply. It's an issue of compliance. And I think of it as a sort of an insurance policy to make sure that you know that you've got your things covered. So being more proactive again, if required. But overall, promote results, promote collaboration, promote internal communication. That's what you need from HR. The other stakeholder group, what do they need from HR is really, well, they don't need from HR, but what they need is they need good leaders, and HR will help hopefully provide some guidance to the leaders. And the reason I put that there is it's survey after survey. We know that the reasons people quit, it's not because usually of pay. It's not the number one reason. The number one reason is they leave because of their boss, their direct manager. So good HR can help the culture and could help leaders be more informed, help them along and be their own coach. So then they can lead their workforce. Of course, the employees also need good communication. So we can help in that. They might need tools as where do I access my benefits and how, and I'm changing my bank account and all that sort of thing. They need clear expectations, an opportunity to give feedback and get feedback, and of course, will need to be developed over time. So I look at, in order for employers to get what they need, in order for employees to stay and be happy, HR will have some needs as well. And they need some things to be able to administer the programs and support you. And for that, they usually need some level of technology. Technology in terms of how to communicate, if you're in more than one location, how to track all of that performance management, the documentation of conversations and of all the training records and of all the sort of things that happen on a day-to-day basis, and of course metrics, as we talked about, if we want to make some database decisions. So hopefully good HR expertise will help the culture because we're thinking about all those things at once. So bottom line, HR is about helping companies be people-centric. Really long gone are the days where HR is known as the internal police. It used to be that HR are there to hire and fire. Well, hopefully now HR is there to hire and retain and help you make sure that you do all the right things to retain. Now, don't get me wrong, there will be some minutia and some things that are more policing type of activities. But I really believe that when a business owner takes the right advice, and everyone wins because the business owner knows what's going on, the employee gets the information directly from the owner, and the business thrives as a result. So really driving engagement and retaining those people, we can help with that in the end. I'm going to now wind up to everyone's favorite words in any presentation, which is in conclusion. In conclusion, I have two thoughts. Number one is that people come to work. They don't, I believe that every human being gets up in the morning and says, I want to help. I want to service my customer. I want to do well. I want to succeed. And so when we approach people issues from that, give them the information and give them all of the tools to be able to do that, everybody wins, right? So why not make it as enjoyable a work environment as possible? Because they spend a lot of time there. My second thought is that HR should never be in the limelight. They should guide the owners. They should guide the leaders to be better leaders, or let them know that they're doing exactly the right things, because people work for the business owners. They work for their direct boss. They don't work for HR. So it's very important it's not about separating HR from the business per se. We're kind of a guide in the background. So I really do believe it's a people business, and taking care of our people in the people business is critical, because you won't be able to sell any product without the people to sell it there. So lots of information, perhaps information overload, especially being the very last session. But on that note, I'll open it up for questions.
No
Thanks,
questions
Joanne.
on my side.
I have a question. I have a question or two. So the floor covering business, Joanne, that was great information, by the way. Thank you very much for all that stuff. Lots of good things that people can ponder there. This business, the floor covering industry, whether you're in manufacturing, distribution, retail, whatever stage you're at in the business, we're all suffering from the same thing that everybody in Canada seems to be suffering from who's in business these days, and that is a shortage of skilled people. It's everywhere. I think one of the comments I hear a lot from our dealers and from our customers is that they're afraid to train employees at those skills that are required in the floor covering industry for fear that they're going to be poached. You spend a lot of time and money on bringing a young person into your store, a young installer into the store, and get them all trained up. And the second somebody offers them $1 an hour more, they're gone.
Well, it's very true that's a fear that's been around a very long time. It's not recent at all. I've been around a long time, and I remember hearing that 20 years ago. But I prefer to think of it as, if you don't train them, you will lose them for sure, especially for $1 an hour more. So, to sort of switch our thinking and say, if we invest in our people, now they will choose to stay, as opposed to choose to leave. And even sometimes the best advocates are someone who's left your organization and has come back because they find out the grass is not greener elsewhere. But I do believe that training your people, and that's what especially Generation X, millennials, I can't wish, yeah, and now the next one, which is Generation Z, they want the training, they crave it. So without the training, you're more at risk of losing your people than you are if you train them. That's my, I've seen lots and lots of data around that. The issue that you started off with, though, is very real, which is there's just not enough people out there. What I find interesting about that is, whether you're listening to Google or you're listening to the large employers and the banks, they all say we can't find anybody. How is it possible that every industry is saying the same thing? And my thoughts on that is that it's because we're looking for the same old skills. If we think of it as switching a little bit, there will be candidates out there if we're a little more creative in what kind of skills do we need. That's why things like conflict resolution has become a more important skill than strong at math or problem, that sort of thing. So if you look at it as change your skill set a little bit, don't try to hire the same cookie cutter person you tried to hire 15 years ago or even 5 years ago, but really be very open-minded as to the type of candidate, and then mold them along the way. Then you're opening up your pool of talent, because it's humanly impossible that everybody is in a jam that they can't find. It's because they haven't changed the way they think. Now you add on that AI as it continues to evolve. It's a complicated landscape for sure.
I suppose it
Yeah.
partly goes back to that slide as well, that the what really matters slide. The
Mhm.
more of those things you can implement, even in a small store setting, the less likely people will be jumping ship for
Absolutely,
lack of balance,
absolutely. And
whatever.
you know, number one is still camaraderie. People want to enjoy being there. People want to work with friends, and they are proud, and they want to work with people that are just as proud and hardworking as they are. So if you do a lot of the things that are on here, chances are you'll have very low turnover.
I think also you could probably, some of the things I've seen some successful business owners over the years do is uh, for key employees particularly, is give them a piece of the action in some small way, bring them into the store ownership
That's a
category.
big plus if you can do that, for sure.
Yeah, not everybody can,
Yeah,
but I mean, for
yeah.
those out there who have that possibility and they have key employees that they don't want to lose, there's nothing quicker to keep them in the fold
Yeah.
than to somehow bring them into a small ownership position within the company itself.
And I also find that letting people know the reasons behind your decisions, keeping them informed, keeping them, even sometimes if we're talking about things like competitive pay, or if you can't bring them into the business, let them know why, and what else can you do, and let's talk it through. And that personal touch, the small businesses that a lot of retailers are running, you're in a better position than the large employers, because you're in a position where you can have a personal relationship, you can have a good conversation with people, much better than a big company with, that treats you like a number. So that's actually a competitive advantage, I think, in your industry.
One other question I had, more of a general question. A lot of the stuff that you've shown today is terrific stuff, and I've known even at Fusion here, and the way you've helped us through some of these sorts of more complex things, the legislation and all those employment legislation, all that kind of stuff. Are there actually, and I'm asking a bit of a loaded question maybe here, are there actually HR consultants out there who will do work for small businesses? And when I say small, I mean just a local retailer who's selling flooring, maybe a 4 or 5 person operation, but they don't have a lot of HR background, and they don't know where to go for HR information should they need it. Are there those kinds of consultants out there who specialize in that kind of small business?
Absolutely. It's a very good question. There's tons of people who do it. Like a lot of people will represent 20 companies, 30 companies, because they might only get a call from company A once a month, or they might end up having to do a small project for company B. So instead of having one client or 2, 3 clients, they'll have multitude of clients, and that works better. So it's much more affordable for the employer, and and then the consultant can then apply their knowledge to a wider group of people. Now, I would say that your number one place to try is, well, there's 2 main places. Number one is probably your local board of trade, your local chamber of commerce. They often have consultants on hand that will work for a fee, but they're not as expensive as if you go to the big consulting houses. So your chamber of commerce will have resources like that. There's also every area, province, every general city has an HR association, and that professional association has tons of consultants on hand. I also know myself, I could refer some people. So that is quite common, actually, Chris.
Perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if we've got no more questions, I have no more. And at this point, I guess we'll conclude. Thank you very much, Joanne, for your
Thank you.
insight and your knowledge that you've passed on to us today. I'll just remind everyone that these sessions that we've done have all been recorded, and we will certainly post links to them in the future so that people can watch them again, or those of you who may have missed a couple of them here and there, you can get back to them and see them at your leisure when you have some time. So thank you again. Thanks for a great session, and we'll talk to everybody later.
Thanks, Chris. Bye-bye.
Bye.